Ever wonder why some people thrive under pressure while others break? It's not luck, it's science. Welcome to the Mind Performance Podcast. I'm Lindsay Paoli, a therapist and a mental performance strategist. Each episode, you'll get expert insights, real stories from high performers, and small shifts that lead to big results, so you can be better at what matters. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome finally to the very first episode of the Mind Performance Pod. My name is Lindsay Paoli. I will be your host. I'm also a dual licensed therapist and a mental performance strategist who works solely with entrepreneurs, business owners, and business leaders and teams to implement mental performance as a strategy in business and in life, rather than your secret hidden downfall. Now, I'm going to be reading off the script because I'm really nervous, and that's why I've put off doing this for so long. But my message for today really is to help you to get to know a little bit about me and to let you know really the intents and purposes of this podcast, which is to learn right alongside with me. I think one of the biggest frustrations in therapy is that people see therapists as these experts, or they see right through them as being the experts and having like a chaotic life behind the scenes. And I kind of want to bring down that wall and allow you to learn from other experts with me, to have really powerful, validating conversations with other people, and to listen to some of the teachings of the things that I have learned along the way. So who is this podcast for? Again, I work solely with business owners, leaders, and entrepreneurs. So this content is really going to hit most for those people. But I also want to say that this is for the everyman, which goes against every marketing strategy I've ever been told. Never make your content for everybody. But the reason that I've been passionate about creating a podcast is my social media content, my blogs, even my coaching really is so customized for a certain level of person who is already meeting a certain level of success. Having gone into the mental health field, my passion really is in helping everybody to improve their mental health through what I call mental performance. Instead of looking for the diagnoses and the labels and all of the things that are going wrong, teaching you all of the things that are going right and all of the tiny shifts that you can move to empower yourself to do just a little bit better every day and allow that to compound. So this to me is a free resource that is available to anybody who's looking to get better. And if you are an entrepreneur, a business owner, or a leader, or aspiring to be, it's really going to hit home in some of the psychology, marketing, and like sales type episodes. All right, let's refer to our notes here. It says my personal story, and I'm avoiding that, so we will come back to that. What to expect in future episodes. I am really looking to make this a opportunity to meet other high performers who you may not have ever guessed were struggling. My very first guest is one that I'm so excited about. He is a personal friend of mine and an incredibly successful person who is also now serving a federal prison sentence. But his mindset is so powerful. And I know you're like, girl, where are you taking me? But it's going to be a really powerful episode, and I can't wait for you to hear it. And so my goal is to be interviewing lots of people from different levels of success and help you get on the insides of their brains, which I don't think is something that a lot of podcast episodes do in the way that I want to do it as a therapist. Also, the mission with my work is always to give you like really small, actionable takeaways. So I know as soon as people hear that I'm a therapist, like they tune out. And that's exactly how I am too. I will get into my story here in a second, but I don't love therapy. I don't love the mental health industry. I think that it's kind of a confused, backwards system that doesn't help people in the way that I think that we need people to be helped. And so my goal is to really teach you from the foundation up how we can kind of flip that and empower people to be the greatest experts of their own minds and bodies, and therefore see the results from that rather than encouraging them to seek that quote unquote experts that just want to spend a lot of time potentially in the past or giving tips and tricks rather than helping them to create a more empowering system to attach to their own intuition. Also, you're getting a behind the scenes of me. I am like a very ADHD, flighty, I hate public speaking, even though it's something that I really am striving to be better at. And so part of doing this podcast too is you get to go on this journey right along with me. If you've had aspirations of speaking or becoming more confident in doing something, or there's something you've avoided forever and you're looking to be encouraged to do it, I am taking messy action and showing you exactly what I teach my clients to do, to just sit in the discomfort. I have had this fancy microphone for 6 months in pursuit of starting this first episode, and I don't think it's even necessary. I'm now in a hotel room instead of a fancy recording place because I don't know where that fancy recording place is going to be. I just moved across the country with my family, and I was just like, you know how you just get sick of your own shit? I'm sick of my own shit, so fuck it, we're starting it, and you guys get to see the messy action and hopefully be a part of my growth journey along the way too. So with that being said, we're already kind of unmasking a bit. Let me tell you a little bit about me and why I got into the world of therapy, why mental performance is my passion, and why it's so crucial for me in my mind to work with entrepreneurs and business leaders. So if we go way back to when I was a little baby, I was born into a military family, a very young military family. My mom and dad were 19 and 20 when they had me, and my dad was in the Air Force. My mom's dad was in the Air Force. They met in Spain, and they had me as a very young couple. My dad went on to become an efficiency expert for the United States Air Force and did an entire career of 30 years of service in the Air Force. Go Air Force, go military. I'm a staunch patriot, not in the weird political way that has been hijacked, but like I just firmly am a big fan of America. And I think a lot of it comes from having lived in so many different places growing up as a military kid that do not have the same privileges and amazingness that we should be proud to have in America. I have two younger brothers. They're twins and they're 6 years younger than me. And so my parents had 3 kids by the age of 25. I didn't start having kids until 35. And for a very long time, I thought there was something wrong with me because the military culture does tend to be so young. But I look back now on my parents raising us and think all the time, like, holy shit, how were they surviving? And we were very much kind of scraping by. My dad was enlisted. He wasn't an officer or a pilot. So you're very much climbing the ranks and living in, I remember, a cinder block house on base housing in Honolulu, Hawaii. So pros and cons. We were in Hawaii, but it's one of the smallest homes I remember growing up in. At that time, we were also on WIC and government assistance. And so all this to say, we came from very much nothing. Like the life experience that I have now seems so far removed from where I came from, and just the humble beginnings that my family also came from and worked their way through. The military is a very big part of who I am as a person. I think that growing up as a military brat, you're taught to always strive for excellence. You are taught especially maybe with my dad and his role, a very clear routine and structure for doing things and for living your life. And I think that that was really helpful to me as I grew up, having that type of upbringing where, like you need to fold things a certain way. And there's a certain, like, you should make your bed every day. I'm cheating. I'm in a hotel. The other one's not made, but there is a good way of doing things and a not so right way of doing things. And I think that that type of structure has been very, very helpful to me as an ADHD entrepreneur. That also comes with a lot of baggage of the black and white thinking that if I'm not doing things perfectly, I'm not doing them at all. And something that I've really had to strive to overcome. So if we go back to my family and why this all has to do with mental health is when my youngest brother was very young, probably 4 years old, he got his first diagnosis of ADHD. And it was very disrupting to the family, especially as a military family who at the time was stationed overseas, because the military has gotten a lot better, but at the time, in the early 90s, we were not talking about mental health the way that we are now. And so even the fact that, he got the diagnosis because he got kicked out of preschool for bad behavior at 4. But the military also teaches you very much to be obedient and to fit in and to fall in rank and to not be disruptive. And I think a lot of my views on mental health come through the lens of that military medical model that is very outdated, and why I very much like rage against the machine for the mental health industry. So he was diagnosed at 4. I think he was medicated at 5. I remember even being, maybe 10 years old at the time, big changes in him, like this 5-year-old saying he didn't like the medicine, him having like tummy aches and not wanting to eat and kind of like zoning out, but he was also not causing problems. And so that was a win. As he and we all got older, there was certainly no talk of like family therapy that I remember. It was very much just like your brother's kind of a problem and we need to overcome the problem and not stand out negatively. So it became very like secret that we would struggle as a family at all. And then as he got older, his diagnosis changed. I think he was 12 years old when he got a diagnosis for bipolar, which again was very common in the late 90s. And as a mental health professional now, just wild. And again, thank God so much has changed. But this was what I was raised in and what made me see the mental health industry at all, period. And so he was medicated for bipolar disorder at the age of 12. I think at the time I had just gone away to college. My family did start therapy, and there was a standout period where I remember my dad saying, well, the therapist blamed you for him acting out because you left him. And I now see that through the lens of the disruption of the family is causing his behavior. But at 17 years old, I was certainly not taking that in that way, which further made me just hate therapists in the mental health industry. Now, this is all being said with the backstory of like, I was always so intrigued by psychology. I wanted to grow up and become a psychiatrist. Like I wanted to be in mental health. I wanted to be a doctor of the brain. And my experience with mental health within my family just skewed that grossly. Going through those challenges in the military, hiding it and keeping everything as a perfect front also led me to being what I considered as the golden child of the family. I was the high performer. I was the high achiever. I always got straight A's. I was good at anything I did. Also very characteristic of ADHD in girls. And that also became a big part of my identity, to not cause any disruptions, to never need any help, and to just put on the front for the family of, well, Lindsay got into this great college and Lindsay got a scholarship. And the more I was performing and achieving, the less people were seeing the hidden flaws that maybe we were hiding in our family. So I went away to college and I got into UCLA. I graduated high school in Turkey in a class of 13, a small military base. And I got into UCLA, which was a dream school. However, I couldn't afford it. And so my only option was, I knew I could get an ROTC scholarship. I'd actually been invited to apply at the Air Force Academy and had a general already offer to write my letter of recommendation to get in. And I turned it down because the year prior, it was like the first year that there was a public rape within that school. So fun story. I turned down that opportunity. I knew I could get an ROTC scholarship with these same recommendations, right? So I did. I got a full ride, and I never had any intentions of wanting to be in the military. I love the military and everything that it's done for me. I am not built for the military, and I knew that going in, but it was a means to an end. And I took my full ride and went to UCLA to go off and be a hippie child and go completely against my parents' like very conservative upbringing, and somehow also sustain this ROTC scholarship. It didn't go well. I was unleashed for the first time in a new country. My family was in Germany at the time. I was alone in LA and letting loose. Like I was drinking really hard. I was not built to be on a full scholarship with the military. That really came to a head as we were talking about Don't Ask, Don't Tell one time in one of my military classes. I was pissed and stood up and was yelling at the officer that was teaching about how wrong it was. It was also just so happened that 9/11 had happened at that time. And this is a lot of backstory, but if you make it through, nobody listens to the first episode anyways. If you do, you know more about me than probably anybody. Okay, so this also happened immediately after 9/11. Mind you, I had just graduated from a high school in a 99% Muslim country. So I was not for this big war on Islam instead of a war on terrorists who were fundamentalists. And that was very much the messaging that was happening in these military classes. I caused so much of a disruption. I got pulled aside and was essentially told, like, you are running the risk of losing your scholarship and having to pay us back. Fall in line. Don't cause a scene. Oh, why is this going to make me cry? Or choose to leave on your own. And so I did. Holy shit. Okay. I left that scholarship, and my closest family were my grandparents, who happened to be in Las Vegas. And so I ended up in Las Vegas. I had no intentions of going to Las Vegas. I didn't even apply to UNLV as a backup school. I did not want to go there, but I had no other alternatives, and I couldn't afford anything else. And I didn't have any family. And so I went, and I was very depressed, and I didn't know how to ask for help because I'd always been the person who didn't need help and didn't want to cause any problems or any added attention to myself. And so instead, I became so depressed, I had my first suicide attempt. And that really, again, is a big standout to me for the mental health industry, the way that I was treated in the hospital as an 18-year-old who was struggling with things that I didn't know how to express. I was treated more like a kid who didn't know anything about the world, which is partially true. But it just made me so much more mad at the medical industry than it did make me want to continue down a path of pursuit for mental health. So I didn't. I was at UNLV. I was a pre-med student at UCLA with a focus in psychology. And I went to UNLV and I was like, just get me the fuck out of this school. What's the fastest way to graduate? And it's a school for hospitality. So they were like, you should major in hospitality. And that's what I did. And I ended up getting work on the Strip. And again, I'm really good at pulling my shit together and putting on a great front. And I climbed the ladder really rapidly. Mind you, it took me 11 years to graduate because I had zero interest in hospitality. I didn't have any interest in the jobs that I was doing either. I just was really good at it. I was paying my way through school, so I had to choose work over going to classes on the same thing. It was so stupid. Like, I was literally overseeing the Mirage front desk and overseeing the opening of a new property while taking a front service operations class, and I couldn't make it to one of the tests. And I was like, look, ask me anything. I'm literally doing this in real life. And I didn't pass that class because I couldn't attend because I was trying to juggle it all. So yeah, with all of this said, I did attempt suicide, and I was recommended, of course, to see a therapist, and all of the therapists I went to were just bullshit, and I thought they were stupid, and I still stand by that. That they were not helpful to me at all, even as an 18-year-old high achiever, because most therapists are not trained to focus on the future in the way that I think I needed at the time, and especially at that time 20 years ago. So I got married and divorced in that time because as a military kid, that's what I thought I was supposed to do. I was married by 25. I also owned my own home at 25. I was divorced by 26 because when you're not in a great place mentally, you're not making great decisions, including life partners. And then there was a shame spiral about being divorced. My parents at the time were still married. My grandparents are still married. They're, I think, 50 some years they've been married. And so the shame of having dropped my scholarship, of not being able to pursue the work that I wanted to do, of being divorced, I just felt like I had all of this potential, and I just, in my 20s, kept falling further and further and further down. So again, by about 29, I had my second suicide attempt. I hadn't built any new skills or coping. I was doing all of the same things just at a higher level, and it felt like the risks were resulting in such bigger downfalls. And it was at that time, around 30, that I did end up finding a therapist who kind of shifted everything. And she also happened to be an executive coach, and she just thought totally differently and talked to me totally differently than any other therapist that I'd tried in the past. And it awoke me to like this whole new perspective of the world of mental health. I was like, I can fucking do this. And her name is Kimberly Malloy. Maybe we'll get her on here. That would be a really great interview, honestly. And I always joke that I went straight single white female on her. I was like, how did you get here? What do I do to become a therapist? How do I also become an executive coach? Like, how do I become just like you? And she was great. She literally helped me apply for colleges and put me down the path. And at the time, she was helping me because I was going through terrible relationships. I also met my husband while working with her, and I credit that in part to the work that we were doing together in me choosing a good person for me, because I went through a lot of really bad ones. And he was like, well, you don't love what you're doing. Why don't you just quit and start over and be a therapist? And I did. I went back to grad school. I worked in a nightclub to pay my way through grad school. We got married while I was in grad school. We had 2 babies while I was in grad school. And then I graduated. I was like, holy shit, now we're going to open a business. And we did right before the pandemic. In 2019, I opened my business, Fun Mental Health with Lindsay Paoli. And then the pandemic hit and it changed therapy, I think, for everyone. It definitely changed my business for me. It also made me recognize how the companies that I had worked for prior, I had worked not only at the Mirage and helped open Vidara, I also went on to work with Win and Encore. I worked with Mr. Win's personal guests, and then I moved on to Cosmopolitan almost immediately after opening to help in their guest service department to overcome a lot of the repeating problems that they were having as a new property, creating interdepartmental shifts and communication to create prevention of negative guest experiences, and then to overcome negative guest experiences with positive guest experiences. Anyways, I looked back after COVID and realized how much the corporate world needed this kind of mental strategy for its leaders, because it's something that I could have benefited greatly from as I was climbing the ranks and taking care of all of these other people. And so my business shifted to really focusing. I had already been working with high performers, but really focusing on the strategy of mental performance. And so I think that is a lot of backstory. I have no idea how long we've been talking. I cried, which I did not expect. I think that brings us up to date now, enough for a first episode. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. My notes say closing remarks. So I want to take some time to thank you so much for tuning in to this very first episode of the Mind Performance Pod. I want you to remember that all of our discussions moving forward are going to be helping you to feel seen and validated, hopefully in my stories and others, and also emphasizing the importance of making really tiny shifts for massive outcomes. I will be releasing a new episode every week, and I hope that you will follow along with me and tune in each and every week. I wanted to also ask you to be sure to subscribe and share. Obviously, this is my first episode, but the more people that we can get listening along and contributing their stories, the more impact I truly believe that we can make on mental health in the whole world. So thanks so much for being here. I think that's it for today, guys. I'd love for you to share a review and subscription. Be better at what matters. I'm Lindsay Paoli. Thank you so much for tuning in today. It truly means the world that you're here and part of this new community. And since it's my birthday week and the official launch of the Mind Performance Pod, I wanted to celebrate you by giving back. I'm gifting a few of my favorite tools to help you perform better, including private coaching inside the Mind Performance Accelerator, 6 months of access to the Rewire Mastermind, and some Mind Master planners. All you've got to do is leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts, screenshot it, and tag me on Instagram at Mind Performance Pod to enter. It's my way of saying thank you for supporting this new adventure and for doing the work to rewire your own mind.